Hi there. On this week's edition of El Dorado Shines, we'll be chatting with Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment, the Honorable Robert Posad. Minister Posad will be providing us with an update on the performance of the sector. We are a few days away from general and regional elections here in Guyana, so it would only be fitting for the minister to also update us on what would have been happening during his tenure as minister. Minister Posad, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for having me.
As we sit here today, we know that the price for gold globally is a major challenge, particularly for our small and medium scale miners here in Guyana. Just a couple of days ago, the Guyana Gold and Diamond Miners Association would have had a meeting at which several complaints were raised, particularly as it relates to miners not being given enough help, so to speak, by the Natural Resources Ministry, by the government. First of all, in a general sense, could you tell us some of the interventions maybe the ministry would have been making over the years?
Well, the ministry was created following the November 2011 election, so this is the newest of ministries that we have, and was an innovative step also taken in terms of governance of the natural resources and environment sector, where you have a number of agencies were situated in different parts of government, and this itself posed problem for local coordination, for investors, and even for the regulation of both natural resources as well as an environment activity. And President Ramatar took that bold decision, as other countries are doing increasingly, of having harmonization and having this overarching management of both the natural resources and environment sector. What that has allowed us to do is to focus and be able to ensure that the different subsectors on the natural resources side as well as the environment side, that we are much more prepared, we are much more friendly, we're much more proactive, and also be diligent in terms of a reaction in responding to situations, be it global situations as well as local situations that may affect one subsector or another. You refer to the issue of mining, but particularly gold. As you know, gold prices, we have no control over gold prices. And we've enjoyed some good prices over the past, other than last year, the previous 2 years, 3 years, we've seen a bounce. Now we've seen some level of stability, although it's lower than what it was. Guyana, our average production has been in the range of just over 436,000 ounces over the 3-year period. And compared to what's traded globally, you can see it has minimum impact. We've always been responsive in terms of working with the mining sector. One, looking at duty-free concessions to bring down the cost of production. If you're going to be able to adjust and to respond, you have to deal with cost of production. And we've looked at interventions that we can take as a government. So cost of production in terms of looking at incentives, be it for in the area of spare parts, be it for capital equipment that is used in mining, and also extended this facility in the terms of fuel. Our regime of support for small and medium-scale mining is superior, it's better than, take for instance, what exists in Suriname, where the range of benefits that we provide are not available. So we've been very proactive in one sense, but also working with the sector, the association. Yes, I agree, some things have taken, because of the nature of the intervention, some things require parliamentary approval in terms of amending the Customs Act. And we've had to find innovative ways of getting around that through an IDA. And things have not moved as quickly as we would want. But we've been steadfast. We've looked in terms of improving recovery and not intervention, looking at mercury-free technology, appropriate technology, because it's another way in which you can be able to respond. Also, the Guyana Gold Board itself has been working with various stakeholders in ensuring and collaborating with the Bank of Guyana itself too, in ensuring that the prices that our local miners get, that it is not too far below, take for instance what's traded globally, and look at creative ways within our laws and how it is that we can support the foreign exchange support too that we provide in terms of doing some forms of payment to the mining sector. That too has brought down the cost of business in many regards. So there have been a range of interventions, making more mining properties available to Guyanese miners. We've had a number of auctions. We've had a number of lotteries. The amount that we've had over the last 3 years, we have not had take for the preceding 6 or 7 years. So we've been a deliberate effort of reaching out to small and medium-scale miners and giving them access so they don't have to pay huge amounts to work other people's land as it is described.
You mentioned a number of interventions. From the GGDMA standpoint, are those interventions enough? And let me just read for you a few lines from their meeting recently and the concerns that they raised. They're saying among the concerns is the falling gold prices. Of course, we mentioned that, high operation and maintenance cost, poor and inefficient recovery technology, which you just touched on. Reduction in the use of mercury, high land rentals from GGMC, they're saying that's a major issue. Limited lands for miners, despite the fact that there are auctions and lotteries, they're still complaining about limited lands. Disparity in concessions between foreign and local mining entities, high fuel costs, increase in criminal activities and illegal mining, impassable roadways, roads built not surviving the first rainy season, and reclamation costs that are an additional burden, they say, among other things.
You know, I can go through. We've had constant dialogue with the GGDMA. And as a regulatory agency, there will always be a difference in perspective, but I think there's a common agenda for us to move the sector forward. And under each one of those issues, we've been very elaborate in addressing those particular concerns. I can refer to the issue of high rentals. The rentals were in the 1990s were reduced by 50% and were never increased since. We've looked at ways in which we can discuss a possibility of making some adjustments, and it's a matter that was before the cabinet for review. So it's an issue that we've engaged. Take, for instance, the issue of reclamation. The environmental bond that a miner pays is 100,000 Guyana dollars. That's the environmental bond. The cost of repairing, take, for instance, a hectare of mined out area, the lowest cost is 8 million Guyana dollars. The government has come up with a program of $500 million to assist and work with small and medium-scale miners in doing the reclamation activity. So I'll be happy to hear that the association now is talking about high cost. But I would also like to see the activities from their standpoint in this regard. So we've stepped forward with money to help the miners because we recognize, too, that we need to also ensure that we do the various reclamation activities that are taking place. The issue in terms of foreign versus local, all the foreign mining companies here, take for instance even the 3 mining companies, those are perhaps an amalgamation of local miners' properties. And so directly and indirectly, the concessions that they benefit as for prospecting licenses, they themselves have been able to enter into joint ventureship and benefited from those arrangements under our regime that is provided for in the laws of Guyana. So there is no conflict, or in any case, there's no preference as one or the other. And every single mine that is being developed here in Guyana comes and is due to joint ventureship and partnership with the properties that are held by Guyanese, and they too would benefit directly and indirectly from those. So it is a matter of perspective, but I think the association understands these, and I'm quite sure they'll have to represent miners. The association cannot complain about the fact of the efforts we've taken to have lotteries done. In fact, in some areas that we've been told to ease back on the lotteries that we're doing, and we had to push ahead because we believe that miners themselves need to have access in this regard. There's always the issue in terms of equity, who have more property than the other within the local mining sector itself. And these are things that will have to be addressed in terms through dialogue and constant engagement. But all the issues you've raised here, we've been very deliberate, we've been very consistent, we've been very responsive to the association in addressing those. And in going forward, I'm quite sure when the government is re-elected, those are matters, again, that will get the type of attention.
How do you respond to the claims coming from the Mining Association miners that in the rice industry, for instance, interventions are regularly made to bail out rice farmers as it relates to paddy and rice support mechanisms for rice farmers? They said that former President Barjagdio promised to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to improve this Skeldon sugar factory. What they're doing essentially is making a comparison, and they're saying essentially that interventions are made usually, routinely, to help bail out rice farmers. And when it comes to miners, a sector that has been contributing significantly to the economy, that they're being shortchanged?
I think it's an unfair comparison, and I've had this type of discourse with the mining sector already. Take, for instance, what we do. In addition to the regime of concessions for whether it's excavators and pumps and the different machines that are used for the mining industry and various types, the duty-free concessions that are enjoyed. Secondly, the investments that we make in road for the mining sector. We don't spend that money in forestry. We don't spend that money in terms of building roads for a particular sector. The roads that we build is for general development or upliftment of various communities. But we have a specific intervention that we spend in excess of $1 billion every year building mining roads for miners. So another group can come and complain, another sector, take for instance forestry, is a good candidate. Foresters have to develop their own road. We have a specific program where we spend in terms of dealing with that. We set aside $1 billion in terms of new technology and appropriate technology. We have not done that in this focused way for other sectors. I've mentioned the reclamation fund that we've set up in terms of looking at rehabilitation that we've provided. The duty-free concession we talk in terms of reduction for fuel. We haven't extended that. Take, for instance, the sector they've quoted. The fishery sector has a different program in terms of concession for fuel for processing in that regard. But the sectors you've named don't enjoy those benefits. So it's a bit tricky because every sector is unique. Every sector requires different forms of intervention. And we're all Guyanese. We're all contributing to national wealth. And there is no discrimination or preferential treatment. So it is not giving the full picture. But it is not me as a minister who came out of that as formerly Minister of Agriculture and now in the natural resources. I understand the different and the various type and the specific types of interventions that have to be made based on the sectoral activity in this regard. But I can tell you absolutely clear that this government, we have not and we don't have any intention of expressing preference for any, because every sector is important to national wealth, to the development of this country, to prosperity, and we care for every sector.
You mentioned the word preference, no discrimination. Let's turn away from mining for a minute. Under your tenure as Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment, we have seen an increase in what seems to be movement complaining about, arguing about, rising up against foreign investors coming into Guyana with the belief that they're being given preferential treatment as it relates to duty-free concessions, lands, and the list goes on. We know about the current complaints being made against Chinese logging company Baishan Lin. First of all, as Minister of Natural Resources, is there a policy to provide foreign investors with special or different treatment as it relates to local operators?
A first important fact you need to understand that the first and the largest Asian-based company that invests in the natural resources sector did not take place under the PPP Civic. This investment occurred and was in fact brought in when the PNC was in government. I'm not one who look back, but it's good to get a perspective because sometimes we lose that, and I'm referring to Barama Company. The second fact I want to make too is that all of us have to decide as a country whether we want foreign investment. If we have an open policy for foreign investment, we need to know, well, we agree on that. And I don't have any reason to believe that across the political divide or even in civil society itself, that there's any difference. We all know and we are all open to foreign investment. It takes me to the next point. Is there preference for one group of foreign investor over the other? 3 large gold mines are being built, will be larger than what we had at Omai. These aren't Chinese or Asian companies. And they're larger than any other Asian-based Chinese, Indian, or Russian, or whatever, Brazilian, or any other company. These are companies, one, it's out of Canada, Guyana Goldfields. This operation will be larger, employing hundreds of people, and it's moving rapidly apace. The second one is an Australian company, Troy Resources, and they're moving at very advanced pace. Then we have the third one, ETK Sand Springs, which is in the process of mobilizing finances to advance, being a bit behind. These aren't Asian companies, and they're moving ahead with their investment. So this discussion or the focus or the debate, I think it's more hysterical. It's more given the political atmosphere of the time, and unfortunately, and I think it is bad that as a country we're descending to the level where we are identifying some groups as against other groups. We're singling out some groups because Chinese are part of the Guyanese community originally too. They are also part of our rich and diverse culture. And it is unfortunate that we've seen this type of descent into this level of what I consider it's dangerous in the long term and not helpful. In fact, some of the companies that have been moving forward have seen their plans being affected by this type of discourse. The point I want to make absolutely clear, and the president has stated this, no single foreign company, no single Chinese, Indian, or any other company has enjoyed benefits other than what is provided for under the laws of this country. And there's been no, as it were, no preference, or as it were, there's been no special treatment, or there been anyone that has been allowed to circumvent or as it were, to violate the laws. And I dare anyone to provide any evidence of this in the natural resources or perhaps any other sector of the economy.
How do you respond to some of these specific concerns as it relates to Baishenlin? A recent report, and these would have been reports we saw surfacing since last year, they've reemerged. After 10 years of mainly extracting logs and benefiting from billions of dollars worth in tax concessions, remissions, and tax holidays, Chinese company Baishenlin is still to honor its commitment to establish a wood processing plant. They're saying this is a promise not fulfilled and that the administration is doing nothing to address it.
First of all, billions. I'm amused by what the critics say of the concessions. I don't know the true extent, but I'm quite sure it's not billions by that or any other company. Putting that aside, every company that submits an investment plan that is approved by the Guyana Office of Investment, there's a monitoring mechanism. And if they're unable to fulfill the targets that have set and agreed by the Guyana Office for Investment or the condition that is signed between the Ministry of Finance, Go-Invest, and the investor, there are consequences. And I want, again, people to show whether or not steps have not been taken to address that company or any other company that has not been able to deal with it. And the Guyana Forestry Commission, as the regulatory agency within the sector, as well as other agencies that are involved, have, I know, been very aggressive in terms of dealing with these particular issues of whether they're sloth or difficulties. But we also have to recognize, too, take, for instance, I mentioned ETK Sand Springs, and some of the other investors that we have in other areas. Take, for instance, Forest Bauxite, which is moving. These companies themselves are 4, 5, 6 years behind their planned investment, like perhaps some of the other companies that you have named. And what do? There's a mechanism to engage the companies. Some of them, they present a case to revise. Others, you take appropriate steps in this regard, and those are provided for. So to say that someone is looking the other way or allowing this company the other, over a number of years, there have been some difficulties that different companies experience, particularly in mining, metals, where prices globally have slumped. The ability to mobilize capital has been affected. Likewise, in other areas where the global market realities, as well as investors' access to finance has been affected. There are a couple of things we can do, and we have been taking those steps as a government in the different agencies. And it is something that you have to do through a legal, and you have to do dispassionately. You have to do it based on the guidelines that are provided for, because this is not a cowboy country. Because someone writes something or says something, you do this type of knee-jerk. You have to do it in a methodical way and through what is provided for under our laws.
What do you think is the motivation behind this? You mentioned several mining companies that might have be behind in their operation as it relates to the concessions and so on they receive. And it appears as if the Chinese-owned operations are the ones that are under the spotlight. So is it a case in which there is some kind of special arrangement being provided to the Chinese by government, or is it the case that the Chinese are being unfairly targeted by critics?
First of all, I would like to know I would like to know what the critics think of how many Chinese companies that are operating within the forestry sector or the mining sector.
Well, they claim Baishenlin owns almost the whole country.
Oh,
This
okay.
is according to a report in a daily newspaper.
Okay. Well, that's where people get sensational, and the debate sometimes moves to a level that you don't even want to give credibility to those types of description. To the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 Chinese companies that are involved in forestry one way or the other. In mining, I know they're based on the reports, and there was a report, there was a commission that I put in place through the board of the GGMC to review all that is taking place. And they concluded in their report that this company, as well as other Guyanese, because the company was able, the principals are Guyanese, but it's a Chinese company, principals, and under the laws, they were able to do this. Not someone handed them the concessions. This was done at a public auction at the YMCA, and then ended up with supposed to be a one-day auction that ended up 4 days.
This is the mining auction.
The mining auction. And this company, as well as hundreds of other Guyanese, went and through auction. And if people understand what's an auction, it's a bidding. You go publicly, and this is done, and the media were there. Everyone read it, because I made it clear to the sector and to the GGMC, whatever you do, put it in the media, because later someone will talk about a secret deal or a secret arrangement. And all of that was done. So this claim of this company having access to so many concessions or another company can be said also of Guyanese themselves too. But it's through an open and fair and competitive process. What do? Do we put up a law now say, if you are of Chinese descent, you cannot, but then we'll have to extend it now. And if you're of this particular ethnic group, and what are we running in this country? What type of thinking is this? If we're going to now define policy based on ethnicity, and a country that has 6 races, a country that in fact has to manage its social structure in a very sensible way, is that direction that people are proposing that we go down?
What kind of feedback are you getting as Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment from investors here already and potential foreign investors who are looking to come into this country and are looking at the climate, the environment, the atmosphere, and reading these reports?
I think, first of all, people are very upbeat about Guyana. Investors across. I was in the US recently. We go to the mining conference in Canada. Investors all around, they're looking to Guyana, from the Caribbean, from South America. People are very upbeat, Asia themselves. But people take notes of these things. They do take note, and they ask you questions. But I believe that people in the main are very upbeat. And people see through what this is. And I do hope after the 2015 elections, in a couple of days, we'll be able to move past this type of debate, which is not too helpful, and focus on what's good and what's needed for the development of our country.
Let's turn our attention to in the remaining time we have to the oil and gas sector. I know that Guyanese have been waiting for quite some time for the big news, that we have found oil in commercial quantities. And there are several companies now doing exploration work, Exxon maybe the most recent. Are there any new information that you may have that could point us towards that
Well,
reward?
one of the things I'm proud of as Minister of Natural Resource Environment, that under my watch the last 3 years, we've been able to have deployed 3 oil drills off in our offshore resources, deep offshore resources. We had previously Repsol as well as CGX, and for different reasons these weren't successful. Now we have the Deepwater Champion from Exxon, operating some 120 miles offshore. And this morning, in fact, last evening, I was advised that, in fact, the company has encountered oil, or hydrocarbons as it's so described. It's light crude. But I want to also to temper expectation and enthusiasm by saying that the company is currently carrying out full evaluation to determine the extent of the quantity and to confirm whether or not they're commercial quantities. But yes, they have encountered oil, and they are planning in terms of how do they verify and to determine, and as a result, the Deepwater Champion will stay longer than previously planned. So this is good news for our country. It's very promising as we move forward, because this will be a new area. a new frontier of development. And this itself, like what we're doing in other sectors of our economy, will transform Guyana. And I do hope it will lift our commitment as Guyanese to do what is right for Guyana, because it will be an important development, an important sector, will position us globally, will position us as now as a country not only known for our minerals, or precious metals, or bauxite, or agriculture, the food basket, but imagine now this combination of having hydrocarbons and oil and gas. This country will be a super dream, not even a regular dream.
How optimistic are you? I believe some years ago CGX had encountered oil, but that did not materialize into commercial quantities. In this particular case, how optimistic are you?
I have, based on what I've been told and been briefed, my optimism is at a level that has never been before regarding the promise of an oil and gas sector in the near future.
Okay, in just about a minute or so we have remaining, you've not been that visible on the campaign trail. First of all, will you be returning as a Minister of Natural Resources or Minister in general? And if not, what next for Robert Prasad?
Well, visibility is, I think, is not an important determinant in terms of your contribution. You know, I've coordinated the preparation of the manifesto. I've provided all the support that is so necessary, and critical support that is so necessary. For me, it's not, the publicity and the glare of publicity is something that I think, I'm not sure whether it's age or maturity that I tend to shy away from. But it's getting the work done and doing what's good for a country. In terms of what happens ministerial, I'm quite sure the PPP Civic will win the elections. But it's a decision that I have not fully contemplated, and I will have some conversations with the president in terms of moving forward. But I believe that I've served. I've done as the best as I can in two sectors, and perhaps it is time to look ahead and see what else I can do to make an impact that is sufficiently positive for the development of our people and our country.
Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment, Robert Prasad, thank you for coming on. Good luck going forward.
Check us out on the internet for this and every episode of El Dorado Shines. Just go to YouTube, search for El Dorado Shines, and start watching. Or like us on Facebook and receive instant updates. You've been watching El Dorado Shines. Do join us again next week for another program. Until then, do remember that we all have a role to play in protecting the environment.